We've got Akhil Gupta, the Deputy Group CEO and Managing Director of Bharti Enterprises, now joining us from the sidelines of the Kotak conference. Afternoon, sir, and thanks so much for joining us. What disappointed the street in the quarter gone by was the Africa performance. And now, going by the current record, it's unlikely that you all will be meeting the initial target of revenues as well as EBITDA that you all had set out for the Africa business of $5 billion and $2 billion respectively. So could you tell us any new target that you've set out for the Africa business and the improvement for revenues and margin?
Well, I think to some extent, yes, it's been a bit delayed in terms of what we expected and what we have achieved, but I would say in Africa we are pretty okay in terms of the overall trajectory and the trends. We are now close to an annualized $4.5 billion of revenue and about $1.2 to $1.3 billion of EBITDA. I think we are on the right path. It's as far as the targets are concerned, I think it's an ongoing growth which we see in Africa, and that's what we will try and capture as quickly as possible.
Mr. Gupta, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. If I can just change track and get to the big macro issue perhaps that's confronting the industry, the decision that 4G license holders can, paying 1650 crores, get to call services, get to providing call services as well. What's your reaction, and how will the company or the industry react?
Unfortunately, I haven't really seen the full text of what was decided, so I'm a little premature in commenting on it. I think the issue will become clearer as we go along.
No, but on the face of it, from what you understood perhaps from the papers, even if you have not read the government's document, actually it was the Telecom Secretary speaking about it yesterday. On the face of it, if this indeed was the case, that call services may be allowed to be provided to the 4G applicant at just 1650 crores, if that is the case, then how would your company react? Would you take it to court? Would litigation be the next step?
I would really want to refrain from commenting on it, partly because we already also have the 4G licenses, as you know, and I think this is an industry issue. Let COI comment on this. Individual players giving their comments on these kind of market developments may not be the right thing to do.
Fair enough.
Mr. Gupta, but just in case another operator who holds the 4G licenses and does convert and opts for providing voice as well, if another operator enters into the highly competitive voice segment, do you see the possibility of going back to the highly competitive, disruptive, the tariff regime that the telecom industry is just about getting out of, in case someone else decides to come in?
Well, I think we have, our stand always been very clear. We are never against competition. We have been against competition which is irrational, but competition per se is never an issue with us. We are a product of competition ourselves, so that's not an issue at all. And to say that any operator who might come in will always be irrational is also not a fair assessment.
Okay.
But what is your sense in terms of where tariffs are headed? The industry has barely begun to claw back the discounts. Will that be the next trend we are going to see for another quarter?
I won't comment on a quarter, but I think what I can say is that on a long-term basis, this industry is very clearly today in a financial, if I may mildly use the term, crisis. The only way for players to get out of this is to have higher realized rates. And that would be a continuous process. It cannot be that it happens in one quarter. We would need to keep elasticity in mind. Therefore, this would be a gradual process, but I think the realized rates do need to go up for health of this industry, because the input costs are constantly rising.
Mr. Gupta, despite the telecom operators last quarter reducing the discounts, it did not flow through in the revenue per minute. That in fact declined for Bharti Airtel on a quarter-on-quarter basis. If you look at the India wireless business, when do you expect this reduction in tariffs and freebies flowing through on the RPMs and the RPMs going up for the Bharti Airtel?
Well, I think some of this action we have started seeing in the last quarter, a little late in the last quarter. Some of them do have some lag effect, And I would say watch for the results for this quarter and the next quarter, and we should see some trends. And if those are not happening, I think it's a serious matter.
How much could the RPMs go up by, given the kind of reduction in free minutes that we've already seen? We could expect.
Well, that would be giving a guidance, so I would refrain from giving any specific guidance on what PESA increase could happen. As I said, this will have to be handled carefully. We have to keep elasticity in mind. This will have to be a bit gradual, but it definitely has to follow a trend for several quarters to come.
The debt issue, you spoke about the financial crisis for the industry yourself. It's about its most solid player, yourself, have faced a rating downgrade from one of the rating agencies for some of your instruments. How do you think in your own company the debt situation is going to pan out? Have you laid out some plans for reduction of debt? If you can also give us some guidance as to how your interest costs will pan out in the coming year.
I think when I look at my debt situation, it's pretty much under control. We, on a consolidated basis, our net debt to EBITDA did come down last quarter because of the Infradel IPO and the proceeds coming from that. So the issue in our case is not about the net debt to EBITDA. That's pretty much manageable and reasonable. The downgrades really reflect the uncertainties in the sector. And when you look at the credit rating agencies, I think what troubled them the most are the uncertainties. And right now the uncertainty is in respect of the spectrum pricing and the amounts which may be required to pay it. So I think those uncertainties would need to go away first.
So what could also increase the debt situation is if you all decide to participate in the March 11 auctions, and particularly so because we've got key cities and metros like Mumbai and Delhi which will be put up for auctions. Now that the prices have been cut by 30%, the reserve prices, do you see Bharti Airtel participating in the upcoming auctions?
Well, definitely you wouldn't expect me to, reply to that because naturally this is not something I would want to comment on. Let's see how those auctions go.
Okay. Is 30% cut in reserve price prohibitive? Because the last time around all the telecom operators, did not opt for these 4 circles which are coming up for auctions. So now with the 30% cut, do you see reserve price being a problem or no?
I think reserve price is definitely a problem. It's still too high. But let me not comment much on that because I don't want to influence any potential bidder one way or the other.
All right, Mr. Gupta, we'll leave it at that. Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. All right, that's the several factors that are crowding the telecom space and a key player commenting on them. Incidentally, of course, Bharti, as Mr. Gupta himself admitted, is also a 4G holder.
He does.
And therefore doesn't have to complain much, perhaps, if a unified license were given. But it will be interesting to see how the industry as a whole reacts to it. Several other players, of course, could litigate on the matter.
And one of the